A lot of you like to remind me that I don't know shit, but today I can say, oh yeah, wanna bet? Well, get a load of this shit because we've got 3 audio products for you, so let's dive in. Up first is the Freya S, Audio's top-of-the-line solid-state balanced preamp that can operate in 2 modes, passive or active. It comes with a remote control and features a 128-step relay-switched volume control, 5 analog inputs, 2 of which are truly balanced, and 3 analog audio outputs, 1 of which is balanced. The Freya S is an all-analog sub-$600 stereo preamp that should appeal to a lot of audiophile purists. In its passive mode, which is selectable either on the unit itself or using the remote, the Freya S is little more than an input switch and gain control. The Freya will not convert unbalanced or RCA-connected devices to balanced and vice versa in its passive mode. If you want to connect both balanced and unbalanced sources to the Freya S and have the preamp convert and switch between them, without too much fuss, you can put the Freya in its active mode, which utilizes the Nexus differential stage in either a 1x or 4x gain. If your setup is primarily focused on 2-channel playback, in other words, you rely on disc spinners with or without a third-party DAC, or you listen to records with an external phono preamp, no, the Freya S does not have one of its own. The Freya's passive or 1x gain mode will likely serve you well. I would encourage users to try the passive setting first, as it was my favorite, especially when paired with something like my DECWARE amp, an amplifier that I never really want to alter the tone of. Using either the Aegir amplifier or my DECWARE to drive our Heresy 4s, the Freya's passive mode epitomized transparency. Passive or active, the resulting tone and measurements of the Heresy weren't changed. However, when placed in its active 4x mode, there was a boost in gain. So tonally, top to bottom, the presence of the Freya didn't alter the sound of one of our favorite speakers, nor did it subtract anything from the already stellar sonics of the DECWARE. Now, if you have higher sensitivity speakers like our clips, you may notice a little bit more tweeter hiss or a higher noise floor when the Freya is in its 4x gain mode. When watching TV or movies through our TCL TV and the Modi DAC, the 4x gain of the Freya S was necessary to maximize the signal's dynamic range and presence in our room. But like I said, it also raised the noise floor. Sonically, I found nothing wrong with the Freya S, and if you are on the market for a simple, remote controllable stereo preamp, it's definitely a great place to start. But there is a learning curve even for experienced users. The hieroglyphic symbols used to communicate everything from input and output selection, as well as just passive or active status, is confusing. These symbols are found also on the remote, and while you can get used to them, don't be surprised if you find yourself going to the brand's website to figure out what each button and symbol means so you don't accidentally select the wrong settings. Also, the mechanical stepped volume control is very well built. At first, I loved the feel of it, but the clicking and clacking you have to endure every time you use it gets old. Adjusting the volume with the remote isn't the most accurate either. In fact, making small adjustments can be maddeningly difficult. Each press of the volume button results in 3 to 4 clicks from the volume knob on the unit, which makes more subtle changes in volume tricky. One last thing about the remote, there's no power on-off switch, so don't bother looking for one. Moving on. The Aegir is, in lay terms, a Class A inspired VIDAR. According to the Aegir produces 20 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 40 watts into 4. It's not what I would call a powerhouse, and as a result, it is kind of aimed at speakers that have higher sensitivities or listeners who don't always take things to 11. When it comes to design and build, the Aegir is phenomenal. Seriously, this level of machining for less than $800 is impressive. The Aegir isn't a full-width component, so it may look out of place when paired with their products, but all that aside, the design and build is comparable to costlier components. When paired with the Heresies, which are 99 dB sensitive in room, the Aegir is more than enough to get to concert-like volumes. But when matched with the less efficient Polk R700, it kind of falls flat, unable to properly drive the speaker's 8-inch woofers. If you own speakers like the R700, you may want to look at the VIDAR, which produces more power at 100 watts per channel. But if you really want to stick with the Class A-like signature of the Aegir, it can be run in mono, but you're going to have to buy 2 units. And if you do that, you will be treated to an 80 watt per channel mini monster, at least theoretically. Sonically, when paired with the right speakers, the Aegir may be the only solid-state amplifier that sounds the most like my beloved DECWARE single-ended triode amp when listening to music. It's not an identical sound, but most of the transparency and lack of color that I get from my Zen amp is present with the Aegir. Where it differs from the DECWARE is in the top end. Air, separation, and definition with respect to soundstage is just better on the Zen. Dynamically, I expected the Aegir to destroy the DECWARE. I mean, its 20 watts is 10 times more powerful than the Zen, yet it didn't pull off the upset. If anything, the DECWARE is more effortless in terms of dynamics, regardless of the musical genre. The Aegir actually struggled when I started to turn things up, distorting and clipping noticeably as the volume inched towards 100 dB. And this was my biggest issue and one of the reasons why this review has taken so long, because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining things. I don't believe the Aegir produces the power, well, the brand is claiming. In fact, if I had to guess, and I am guessing, I'd say it produces around half as much as advertised because it cried uncle before the DECWARE ever did. That doesn't make it a bad amp because when playing back music at volumes between 60 and 85 dB, the Aegir is musical AF, and it's one of my favorite budget amps to pair with our Heresy 4s. But if you push the envelope even a little bit, the Aegir doesn't deliver the thrills. When paired to less than efficient speakers, it definitely won't. If you don't want to mess with such a specialized amp, I would look at the more powerful Class AB VIDAR, which may be the better fit for a wider range of speakers. If you're on a budget and want a stereo amplifier that will work with all speakers, the Basics A2 from EMOTIVA is still my go-to. For more advanced audiophiles who don't mind a little bit of a challenge, you still can't beat the Crown XLS DriveCore series. Last up is the Loki Max. Top of the line, 6-band, remote controllable EQ. Honestly, this was the product that I was most excited to review because I love to tweak and have no bias against using EQ in a HiFi system. Like all of the products discussed in this review, the Loki Max is built to an incredibly high level and from materials you would expect to pay a lot more for. Installed between the Freya S and the Aegir, the Loki Max is dead nuts silent with all of its 6 pots in the neutral position, which is what you want from a quality EQ. As you start to adjust any of the dials, either manually or via the remote, you are treated to the same confident mechanical clicks you're going to find with the Freya S. But as you start to make those adjustments to the Loki, noise becomes audible. Even more so if you make significant changes to any one band. For example, tweeter and even mid-range horn hiss could be heard from the Heresy 4s from my listening chair when I made anything more than a minor adjustment. Using the free software Room EQ Wizard and my calibrated microphone, I measured our Klipsch speakers before applying any corrections with the Loki Max. With a baseline established, I was able to, correct the response to better fit my room, taking measurements each step of the way to ensure I didn't make any changes that made the speaker's response worse. The Loki Max allowed me to achieve a more or less linear response, one that I could both hear and measure. But this brings me to my biggest issue with the Loki Max, or any by-ear equalization for that matter. I take no issue with EQing a speaker to your liking. After all, the only person who has to like the sound of anything is you. But if your goal is accuracy, you need a way to measure your adjustments in order to make sure that you're not negatively changing your speaker's response. So if you're going to measure your results anyway, why not use those measurements to create PEQ filters that you can later import into a device like MINIDSP's SHD or 2x4? Compared to the MINIDSP SHD, which costs roughly the same as the Loki Max, you get a far more advanced PEQ solution that enables even finer adjustments to your speaker's response, is absolutely silent as you make changes, can enable you to add up to 4 subwoofers to your system, and can even act as a preamp and DAC. Oh, and it supports Dirac too. As cool and as well built as the Loki Max is, and it is, the MINIDSP's better performance and value gets my recommendation. Of course, if you want to keep things all analog and prefer the old school charm of the Loki Max, I get it. But if you're using an EQ to get the best possible performance from your speakers in your room, there are less expensive and potentially way better solutions. So if I had to rank these products, I'd put the Freya S first, followed by the Aegir, and then the Loki Max. The Freya S is a really good transparent preamp. If you're into separates or an analog purist, it should probably be on your short list. I know I can see a situation where it would come in handy in evaluating the quality of different amps in our reviews because it's that transparent. The fact that it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, that's the bonus. The Aegir, it's a good amp, but it's a specialized one, and it's one that may not be ideal for all listeners. As for the Loki Max, great concept, cool product in theory, but not a great value. And if utilized too much, it can actually introduce noise into your system where none may have existed before. So your mileage may vary. So that's all I've got to say. That's it for me and Audio's Freya S, the Aegir, and the Loki Max. But now it's time for you to tell me, what did you think? Which of these three products would be on your short list, or would you take the whole lot because you really like what you saw here? Sound off down in the comments below. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Christy left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us thank you all very, very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at @RecoveringAudiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.